So you're doing everything right. Good job, steady income, sensible spending. And yet building wealth and improving your financial situation feels like it's always just out of reach, like you're running on some sort of treadmill that just keeps speeding up. Here's the thing. That is not an accident, and you, my friend, are not failing. See, the habits that you were raised to believe were responsible, well, they were never designed to build and accumulate wealth. They were designed to keep you comfortable, compliant, and consuming. And if you don't see them for what they are, you'll start spending the next decade working harder than ever with nothing to show for it. So in this video, I'm going to break down 5 middle-class habits that are quietly engineered to keep you from building real wealth, so you can finally stop playing a game that was completely rigged from the start. So let's get into it. Habit number 1, the cash is king trap. Now, a little while back, I was waiting in this reception office of a specialist tax accountant's office. Long story short, I work with a US client, and for American citizens living in the UK, the tax situation is an absolute nightmare. So we need to bring in a specialist. That's why I'm there. Anyway, I'm sitting there and I'm just waiting. And next to me are 2 guys who are quite clearly American, right? And they're just openly, nonchalantly talking about their investment portfolios, which ETFs they're going to pick up, how they're rebalancing, what sectors they're looking at. Just like a super casual conversation, like they were talking about the Sunday football. And do you know what? At the time, that genuinely hit me quite hard, because we just do not have that culture here in the UK, do we? See, I think the UK genuinely has a stock market problem, and the data kind of backs this up. When it comes to money in this country, it pretty much comes in kind of 2 different flavors, doesn't it? You either stack cash in the bank, or if you're feeling super adventurous, you buy a buy-to-let property. I cannot tell you how many barbecues I've been stuck at listening to someone tell me the virtues of becoming a landlord. But anyway, that is a whole nother video. The point is, in the UK, we have this deep cultural phobia of the stock market. I think we treat it like gambling, like speculation. If you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't drive past it on your way to work. And that perspective is, I think, significantly holding people back. Let me show you what that actually costs you in real money. So let's say that you've got £50,000 sitting in a savings account, or just a regular current account like some people do. Now, over 5 years, with UK inflation averaging about 3%, it goes up and down way more than that, that money hasn't grown at all or kept safe. It's actually shrunk. The real purchasing power of that £50,000 is now, after 5 years, closer to £43,000. You haven't lost any money on paper. That £50,000 is still there, but inflation is quietly eating nearly £7,000 of what you can actually afford to buy. Now, if you took some of that £50,000 and put it into a diversified, reasonably conservative investment portfolio, returning, say, 6% a year, after 5 years, you're sitting on approximately £66,900. That is a difference of nearly £24,000, not from doing anything radical, just by not leaving your money to rot. See, most people have this conception of risk that is almost completely backwards. In the short term, yes, cash feels safe, and investing to any degree of risk feels risky. It's volatile. But over the long term, leaving the cash in the bank is the risk. Investing is almost the only surefire way to actually protect and grow your money. So ask yourself this: any money that you can reasonably put away or not touch for 5 years or more, what are you actually doing with it? Give every pound a job is the most critical thing ever here. And remember, you don't have to go from cash to investing in the full-blown stock market. There are many ways that you can increase your level of risk and return without just jumping straight into the stock market. So the key thing is, you have to remember here, that if it's longer than 5 years, you can do something with it. Because honestly, the reality here is the safest place to keep your money, cash, is also the surest way that you have of losing it. Habit number 2. Now, I don't know if it's just my experience or the circles that I move in or whatever, but there almost seems to be this unhealthy obsession right now with just arbitrarily chasing like a higher salary. And look, on the surface, that makes sense. Obviously, of course, you want to earn more. We're all told the same story, right? Work hard, get promoted, earn more, win. But here's what I actually see in absolute practice. There is genuinely, I think, no proven correlation between how much someone earns and how much wealth they actually build. In fact, I would genuinely say that some of my wealthiest clients, people sitting on genuinely significant assets, most of them never will have earned, say, more than 50 to 100,000 pounds their whole lives. Now, that is a decent income, don't get me wrong, but it's not like life-changing income, not on its own. The key is that if you're focused on your salary, you're kind of tracking the wrong number entirely. I always use what I call a concept called the wealth velocity, okay? It is super, super simple. Take what you earn each month, subtract your fixed cost of living, and whatever's left over is your wealth velocity, the actual kind of ammunition that you have to build wealth with. So let's say, for example, if you're earning £10,000 but spending £9,000, your wealth velocity is £1,000, obviously, right? But here's the interesting bit. Someone earning £5,000 but is spending £4,000 has exactly the same velocity. One person earns twice as much, but they both have the same kind of ammunition and firepower to actually move forward. And to be honest with you, this concept matters way more right now than ever before, because the UK, the tax environment here is absolutely brutal at the moment, particularly above that 100k threshold, where you start losing your personal allowance. So you can technically be earning so much, but actually keeping very little of it. So stop staring at the headline figure on your payslip, the vanity metrics, and start asking yourself, what is my wealth velocity? How much am I actually keeping? And more importantly, where is it going? Now, the real shift is moving from thinking like a high earner to thinking like an owner. The reality is that your income is rented, essentially. Every month you go to work, you are exchanging time for money. That's the reality of that situation. And when you stop, it stops. Assets work completely the other way around. You do not get rich by just arbitrarily earning more. You get rich by owning things that earn for you. Really super simple. Now, habit number 3, being emotional about money. Now, when I start working with a new client, one of the first things that we want to understand is what they actually want to do with their money, right? Not vague goals like grow my wealth, but concrete numbers, concrete timelines. And the tool that we typically use for that is something called cash flow modeling, right? You put the numbers in, you apply some assumptions about growth and tax and inflation, and it spits out a pretty clear picture. How much you need to contribute, how much you can safely withdraw, what you need to put where and when. It's basically just a very, very complicated spreadsheet, but it works brilliantly. But here's what I've noticed after doing this with genuinely hundreds of people, right? There are essentially 2 very distinct reactions to that sort of process. The first type of person looks at the model, understands that money is just digits on a bit of paper. And when you apply some basic mathematics, you can run your personal finances pretty effectively. The second type, and there are a lot of them, and I absolutely understand why, finds money deeply emotional. I could present the most logically sound, structurally robust plan imaginable, and I know it's going to fall apart. Not because like the numbers are wrong, but because the person that's dealing with that is going to make decisions based on how they feel at any moment in time. They'll panic sell when markets drop. They'll pile into markets when they're absolutely flying and they're chasing their tail. They'll make huge decisions, right? Buying property, taking on debt, cashing in investments, and all of those other things based on fear, excitement, or ego, worstly. And I completely get it. We are all human. I'm just as guilty as anyone else, mostly. Life doesn't happen just on a spreadsheet. But most people make their biggest financial decisions in an hyped up emotional state. And it is that factor that is quietly destroying their long-term wealth. Things like FOMO, panic, pride. They're not investment strategies or financial planning strategies. Money is just a tool. And the moment that you start treating it like that and you stop treating it like a feeling, you start using money strategically. Look, you don't have to live like a robot, but you do need to understand one simple thing. The most expensive thing that you'll ever buy is a financial decision made in an emotional state. Habit number 4, lifestyle inflation in the wrong places. Look, we all know the concept of lifestyle inflation, right? As your income rises, your spending rises to match, and you never really get ahead. It's a real genuine problem. But here's the nuance that most people miss about lifestyle inflation. Not all lifestyle inflation is bad. It's just lifestyle inflation in the wrong places that is really, really bad. So a few years ago, I remember having a conversation with this guy who was an analyst at a fund that we were working with for some of our clients. Classic data guy, right? Completely unassuming. He didn't care about his appearance clearly at all. He was back office and never expected anyone to see him. He was wearing like this rubbish suit that was well worn in. And I remember he always used this like disposable pen, which is absolutely fine, but it just seemed a bit weird. Anyway, nothing about this man that I was working with screamed, I'm a big lifestyle spender. Now, we were randomly chatting one day and in one of our coffee breaks that we had. And I asked him out of interest, I was like, look, you analyze investments all day long and all this sort of stuff. What is like the best investment you have ever made? And genuinely, without hesitating, he like pulls out of his phone and showed me a photo of a gold Rolex. And this was a bit strange because I looked at his wrist earlier in the day. It's one of the things that I do as I look at what watches are people wearing. Don't ask me why. I looked at his wrist earlier in the day and he was wearing up this beaten up old Casio. It was quite vintage, actually. It was kind of cool. But I was like, this is a bit strange. What do you mean this gold Rolex was your best investment? Anyway, turns out he'd long since sold that Rolex, but here's what he did tell me. Now, this is a really interesting story because he wanted to break into finance and he specifically wanted to break into the firm that he'd been targeting for so long. So what he did was he started hanging around like the pubs and the venues where people at that firm drank after work. He like knew someone who knew someone that was at the company. And he knew that with this gold Rolex on, someone sooner or later would spot that watch over a beer and say, nice watch, mate. And the conversation would begin, which is genuinely what happened. So he started, like, I think he said that some guy came over and was like, look, lovely watch, mate. That conversation turned into a friendship, which turned into an introduction, which eventually got him the job that he has today. Now, look, obviously, I am not telling you to go out and spend your money on arbitrary, silly luxury watches. That is not the point of what I'm trying to say. The point is that he understood in that moment what most people don't. Spending on things that build your value is fundamentally different from spending things that signal value, okay? So renting a flashy car no one cares about feels like a reward, right? Spending £5,000 on a business course or a coach or some sort of credential feels like risk. But one of those two options makes you poorer and the other one makes you more valuable. The key is to, I guess, contain lifestyle inflation But don't be afraid to spend strategically on things that compound. Upgrade your life, not just like your image, essentially. Habit number 5, and this is the one that drives me crazy. Your home is not your portfolio. This might be the single biggest financial misconception in this country. You have been told your whole life that your home is your biggest investment. It isn't. It's your biggest expense dressed up as an asset. Right. Finance 101, okay? Now, there are pretty much 2 types of thing in this world. There is an asset, which is something that you put money into that generates a positive return, either through an income stream or capital growth. A liability is something that costs you money to own and doesn't generate a return. Like, think about like a car, right? Is a great example of this. Classic liability. It depreciates in value. It costs you money to maintain and insurance and fuel, and gives you absolutely nothing back. So the classic thing here is when I graduated from uni, I just got my job as a trainee financial advisor and I was working through all my exams. It was really annoying actually because I did my last university exam, can't even remember when it was, like May or June or whatever it is. And then I was like, oh, I've done my last university exam. Brilliant. I won't have to do any exams for a while. Then got a job as a trainee financial advisor. And then about 2 months later, I was already studying for my next exam. Anyway, and while I was doing all of that, I was sort of consuming, as you can imagine, every single finance book that I could find, right? And most people on that journey, they often start reading all of these books. And me, like all of them, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Now, whatever the shortcomings of that book, and there are many, by the way, that book does a brilliant job at one thing. It drives home the idea that you need to load up on assets and minimize liabilities, okay? And one of the first things that really clicked for me when I was in those early stages was this. The home that you live in is not an asset. Remember, a true asset puts money in your pocket. Your primary residence, the place you live, takes money out of your pocket every single month, doesn't it? Mortgage, maintenance, council tax, insurance, repairs. Unless you're renting out a room or running a business from it or otherwise somehow generating income from it, it's a liability. Now, granted, it's a comfortable, lovely, important to your lifestyle liability, but a liability nonetheless. Look, yes, you're building equity over time in that property. So I do see it as, not necessarily just as arbitrary as a 100% liability, but treating your home as your primary investment strategy leaves you kind of asset rich and cash poor, with all of your eggs in one massive illiquid bucket, essentially. So if all of your wealth is tied up in the bricks and mortar above your head, that's not necessarily financial security. It's financial fragility wearing a convincing disguise. And look, a house you live in is not an investment. It's a lifestyle choice with a mortgage attached. Now, the thing is, if you cure all these habits, you'll go a long way to starting to see your income turn into real wealth. But there is another factor that is probably keeping you stuck. And it's what I call the comfort mirage. It's something that I covered in this video here, so you could probably watch this one next and it will help you. Look, if you're sick of feeling like you're just running on a treadmill from month to month, earning well but still struggling, this video here's for you. So give it a click and I'll see you there.